The Menopause and Perimenopause Bible, a women's health guide to menopause symptoms, hormone balance, hot flashes, weight gain, brain fog, and mood swings. Feel empowered and like yourself again by Caroline Wren. Introduction. The freezer door is heavy, but it swings open with a soft click. It is 3:15 in the morning in a quiet neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Inside the kitchen, the only light comes from the glow of the appliance, casting long blue shadows across the floor. Sarah Jenkins stands there, her forehead pressed against the cold plastic shelf next to a bag of frozen peas. She isn't hungry. She is burning. To anyone else, the house is cool. The air conditioner is humming along at 68 degrees. Her husband, Mark, is upstairs, tucked under a heavy quilt, sound asleep. But for Sarah, it feels like her blood has been replaced with hot lava. A thick, prickly heat started at her chest and raced up her neck, turning her skin a bright, angry red. Now her pajamas are damp with sweat, and her heart is thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. As she stands there in the dark, a different kind of heat rises. This one is a flush of pure embarrassment. She is 47 years old. She manages multi-million-dollar tech projects. She is the person people go to when things fall apart. But lately, Sarah feels like she is the one falling apart. Earlier that day, she sat in a high-stakes board meeting. She had her notes. She had her slides. But when her boss asked a simple question about a deadline, Sarah's mind went completely blank. It wasn't just a tip of the tongue moment. It was as if a giant eraser had swiped across the chalkboard of her brain. She stared at him, her face turning that same shade of red, until a junior colleague stepped in to save her. Now, in the silence of her kitchen, the fear sets in. She wonders if this is the beginning of the end. She wonders if she has early-onset dementia. She wonders if she will ever feel like Sarah again, or if she is destined to be this tired, foggy, irritable version of herself forever. Sarah's story is not just her own. It is a story being told in millions of kitchens, bedrooms, and offices all over the world. It is a story that has been happening for thousands of years, yet for most of history, we have been told to keep the door closed and the lights off. The mystery of the orca. To understand why Sarah is standing in front of her freezer, we have to look away from humans for a moment and look toward the ocean. In the deep, cold waters of the Pacific Northwest, there are pods of orcas, killer whales. These animals are some of the smartest on Earth. They live in tight-knit families. They have complex languages, and they share a very strange biological trait with human beings. In almost every other species on the planet, from dogs to elephants to birds, females can have babies until the day they die. Nature usually views a female's life as a straight line. You are born, you grow up, you reproduce, and then you are finished. But humans and orcas are different. We have a second act. Scientists call this the grandmother hypothesis. In an orca pod, the oldest females stop having babies in their 30s or 40s, but they can live well into their 80s. Why would nature keep them around if they aren't making more whales? The answer is survival. These postmenopausal whales are the ones who know where the salmon are during a drought. They are the ones who lead the pod through dangerous waters. They carry the memory of the entire family. They don't have babies anymore because their new job is to ensure the rest of the family thrives. Menopause isn't a glitch in our system. It isn't a sign that we are broken or used up. Evolution designed this transition on purpose. It is a biological promotion. But for most women today, it doesn't feel like a promotion. It feels like a betrayal, the dark history of the change. If nature intended this to be a powerful new stage of life, why does it feel so miserable for so many of us? To find out, we have to look back at how we have treated women in this transition over the last 200 years. In the mid-1800s, in the crowded streets of London, doctors began to notice a pattern in their middle-aged female patients. These women were complaining of many of the same things Sarah feels: the vapors, melancholia, and irritability. The medical world at the time was run entirely by men who didn't understand the female body. They gave this transition a name, the change of life. But they didn't see it as a natural step forward. They saw it as a disease of the mind. If a woman in the Victorian era complained too loudly about her hot flashes or her changing mood, she might be diagnosed with hysteria. The cure was often terrifying. Some women were sent to asylums. Others were put on rest cures, where they were forbidden from reading, writing, or speaking to anyone for weeks at a time. They were told their brains were simply too fragile to handle the loss of their ability to have children. By the early 1900s, the language changed, but the disrespect stayed the same. Doctors called it involutional melancholia. They believed that when a woman's period stopped, her purpose in society disappeared. She was viewed as a wilting flower, a person whose best days were behind her. This history matters because it created the silence that still haunts us today. It taught our grandmothers to white-knuckle through the pain. It taught our mothers that talking about the change was impolite or embarrassing. It created a world where a woman like Sarah can be a top-level executive, but still feel like she has to hide her symptoms in a freezer at 3 a.m. because she is afraid of being seen as weak or old. The modern fog. Today, we don't put women in asylums for having hot flashes, but we do something almost as bad. We dismiss them. When Sarah finally worked up the courage to see her doctor, she was nervous. She had a list of symptoms written on her phone: the night sweats, the weight gain around her middle that won't budge, the way she snaps at her teenage daughter Maya over nothing, and that terrifying brain fog. Her doctor, a well-meaning man who was clearly in a hurry, looked at her for 5 minutes. He didn't ask about her hormones. He didn't ask about her stress levels. He told her, "You're just a busy mom, Sarah. Everyone is stressed these days. Maybe try an antidepressant or just get more sleep." Sarah left the office feeling smaller than when she walked in. She felt invisible. She felt like her body was a house with a fire in the basement, and the fire department just told her to buy better curtains. This is the core problem. We are living in a time where we have more medical technology than ever before, yet women are still being told that their suffering is just part of aging. We are told to lean in at work and power through at home, all while our internal thermostat is broken and our brain chemistry is shifting under our feet. You might feel like you are losing your mind. You might feel like your body has become a stranger. You might look in the mirror and wonder where that confident, sharp, energetic woman went. I want you to hear this clearly. It is not in your head. You are not just stressed. And you are certainly not finished. The promise of the second spring, this book, is your map through the woods. In traditional Chinese medicine, menopause is called the second spring. It is seen as a time when a woman's energy, which was previously directed toward the needs of others and the cycle of reproduction, is finally returned to her. It is a time of rebirth, clarity, and new power. But you can't get to the second spring if you're stuck in the middle of a storm without a coat. This guide is designed to give you that coat. It is built on the newest science, the kind that has been buried in medical journals or ignored by doctors who haven't updated their textbooks since 1995. We are going to look at the 3 main pillars that hold up your health during this time. The biological pillar. We will pull back the curtain on estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. You will learn how these hormones act as fuel for your brain and why, when that fuel runs low, the engine starts to sputter. The metabolic pillar. We will talk about why the menopause middle happens and why the diets you used in your 20s don't work anymore. You will learn how to work with your new metabolism instead of fighting against it. The psychological pillar. We will tackle the mood swings and the rage that can make you feel like a different person. We will look at how to protect your relationships and your career while your brain is remodeling itself. By the time you finish these pages, you will no longer be a passenger in a body you don't recognize. You will be the driver. You will know exactly what to say to your doctor so you can't be dismissed. You will understand which supplements actually work and which ones are just expensive waste. You will have a toolkit for cooling the fire within and clearing the fog from your mind. You will realize that Sarah's rock bottom moment at the freezer door wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of her transformation, the road ahead. We have a lot of ground to cover. We are going to travel from the boardrooms of New York City in the 1960s to the high-tech labs of today. We will meet pioneers like Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to get a medical degree in the U.S., who fought her whole life to prove that women deserve to understand their own biology. We will also keep following Sarah. We will see her navigate the medical maze, deal with the friction in her marriage, and eventually find the strength to demand a different kind of care. You will see her go from a woman who is afraid of her own brain to a woman who is stronger, sharper, and more confident than she was at 30. The transition you are in right now is big. It is messy. It is loud. But it is also a bridge. On the other side of the hot flashes and the sleepless nights is a version of you that is wiser, more focused, and ready to lead the pod, just like the orcas. You aren't losing yourself. You are shedding an old skin to make room for a better one. The freezer door is closing. The sun is starting to come up. It is time to stop white-knuckling and start thriving. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Ghost of Feminine Forever. I want you to imagine a world where no woman ever has to grow old, Robert Wilson said, leaning across his heavy oak desk. He tapped his finger on a stack of papers. Across from him sat an executive from a large drug company. The room smelled of expensive tobacco and old books. It was 1966 in New York City, and the air was thick with a new kind of promise. A world without the change? The executive asked, raising an eyebrow. Exactly, Wilson replied. We call it a disease, a deficiency. We tell them they are losing their womanhood, and then we sell them the cure. We make them feel like they are fading away, and then we hand them a bottle of youth. Robert Wilson was a doctor with a plan. That year, he published a book called Feminine Forever. It wasn't just a medical guide, it was a manifesto. He claimed that menopause was not a natural part of life. Instead, he called it a deficiency disease, much like scurvy or rickets. He told the world that a woman who stopped having her period was no longer a whole woman. He used words like castrate and unfortunate to describe millions of healthy females. His message was simple: stay on estrogen and you will stay young, beautiful, and happy. If you don't, you will wither away. The drug company, Wyeth, loved this. They funded his book tour. They paid for his travel. They helped turn his ideas into a national sensation. Within a few years, millions of women were taking a drug called Premarin. They weren't taking it because they were sick. They were taking it because they were told that being an older woman was a mistake that needed to be fixed. The medicalization, trapped this moment in history, changed everything for how we think about our bodies today. It created what we call the medicalization of menopause. This is a fancy way of saying that a normal stage of life was turned into a medical emergency. To understand why you might feel invisible or broken, today, you have to understand the three parts of the trap Wilson set for us: the identity crisis. He told women that their value was tied entirely to their ability to have children and look young. Once those things changed, he argued, their value dropped to zero. The fear factor. He used scary language to describe natural shifts. Instead of saying, your hormones are changing, he said, your body is failing. The magic pill. He sold the idea that there is one single solution to a very complex life transition. He ignored food, stress, sleep, and community. He just pointed to the pharmacy. Wilson's ghost still hangs around in our doctor's offices and in the way we talk to ourselves in the mirror. When you feel like you are less than because you have a hot flash or because your genes don't fit the same way, that is Robert Wilson whispering in your ear. He didn't see menopause as a second spring, a time of new energy and wisdom. He saw it as a tragedy. And for decades, the medical world followed his lead. A cold room in Austin. Sarah Jenkins sat on the edge of the exam table in a doctor's office in Austin, Texas. The paper sheet underneath her crinkled every time she moved. She was 47 years old, and she felt like her life was coming apart at the seams. She had spent the morning crying because she couldn't find her car keys. Then she had snapped at her teenage daughter for leaving a cereal bowl on the counter. At work, she was a senior project manager, but lately she felt like she was underwater. She would look at a spreadsheet and forget what the numbers meant. So, Sarah, the doctor said, looking at a tablet instead of her face. What brings you in today? Sarah took a deep breath. I'm exhausted. I can't sleep. My brain feels like it's full of cotton, and I'm so angry all the time. I think something is wrong with my brain. Is it early dementia? The doctor gave a small, tight smile. He didn't look up. You're at a high-pressure job, Sarah. You have 2 teenagers. You're just stressed. It's a busy time of life. I can write you a prescription for a low-dose antidepressant if you'd like. It might take the edge off. Sarah felt a surge of heat rise up her neck. It wasn't just a hot flash, it was fury. I'm not just stressed, she said, her voice trembling. I've been stressed for 20 years. This is different. My body feels like it belongs to a stranger. Well, the doctor said, finally looking at her. You are getting older. It's just part of aging. We all have to deal with it. As Sarah walked out to her car, she felt a strange mix of shame and anger. She felt dismissed, like a child being told to go take a nap. She didn't know it yet, but her doctor was using Robert Wilson's old playbook. He saw her symptoms as something to be managed with a mood pill or ignored as an inevitable decline. He didn't see a woman in the middle of a massive biological renovation. He saw a deficiency that wasn't worth his time. The secret history of the youth pill, before Robert Wilson became a household name, the race to fix women had already begun in some very strange places. In the 1940s, scientists were obsessed with finding a way to control the female body. They started with a drug called DES. It was a synthetic estrogen. Doctors gave it to pregnant women to prevent miscarriages. They told women it would make their babies stronger and their pregnancies easier. It took years to realize that DES was causing terrible health problems for the children born to those women. It was a hard lesson. Messing with the body's natural balance without full understanding can have a high price. But the real success story for the drug companies was Premarin. The name itself tells a story you might not want to hear. It stands for pregnant mares, ini, urine. In the 1940s and 50s, thousands of horses were kept pregnant so their estrogen-rich urine could be collected and turned into pills. It was a massive industrial operation. When Wilson started promoting estrogen as the youth pill in the 60s, the demand for Premarin exploded. By the early 1970s, it was one of the most prescribed drugs in the United States. Women were told it would keep their skin soft, their hearts strong, and their husbands happy. There was very little talk about the long-term effects. There was no talk about how lifestyle, nutrition, or stress played a role. It was a one-size-fits-all solution born out of a marketing meeting, not a laboratory. The problem wasn't that estrogen was bad. Estrogen is actually a powerful and helpful hormone that protects our bones and our brains. The problem was the why and the how. Women weren't being given these tools to feel healthy. They were being given them to stay feminine according to a man's definition. This created a culture where women were afraid to talk about their symptoms. If you were suffering, it meant you were failing at being a woman. You kept your night sweats a secret. You hid your brain fog. You suffered in silence because the alternative was being labeled deficient. The second spring in traditional Chinese medicine, there is a much older and kinder way to look at this time of life. They call menopause the second spring. In the first spring of life, puberty, your energy is directed outward. Your body is preparing to give life to others. You are focused on growth, reproduction, and the needs of the world around you. It is a busy, fertile, and often chaotic time. But the second spring is different. When the monthly cycle stops, the ancient texts say that a woman's blood, or energy, is no longer being used for reproduction. Instead, that energy returns to her heart and her brain. It is seen as a rebirth. It is a time when a woman can finally use her power for herself. She is no longer a slave to her cycle. She becomes a wise woman. In many cultures, this was the time when women became the leaders, the healers, and the decision-makers of the tribe. Compare that to Robert Wilson's view. Wilson saw a woman as a castrate once her periods stopped. The Chinese saw her as a powerhouse who had finally arrived at her full potential. One view leads to a doctor's office and a prescription for the edge. The other leads to a gym, a clean kitchen, a deep breath, and a sense of pride. The reason you feel so stuck right now is that our modern world is built on Wilson's view, but your soul is crying out for the second spring. You are not losing your femininity. You are moving past the version of femininity that was designed to serve everyone else. You are entering a stage where your body is asking you to pay attention to you. Why we need a new Bible if the old Bible of menopause was feminine forever? We need a new one. The old way relied on shame and quick fixes. The new way relies on science, self-awareness, and radical honesty. We have to stop looking at menopause as a single event, a cliff we fall off of. Instead, we need to see it as a perimenopause pivot. This is the 2 to 10 year window where the body is slowly shifting its gears. During this pivot, your internal thermostat starts to flicker. Your brain starts to remodel itself to work without the high levels of estrogen it used to have. Your metabolism changes how it handles fuel. This isn't a sign of a broken body. It's a sign of a body in transition. If you were moving to a new country with a different climate, you would change your clothes. You would learn the new language. You would adjust your schedule. That is what we are doing here. We are learning the language of your new body. To do this, we use a three-pronged approach. Biological, we use the best of modern science. This might include hormone replacement therapy, HRT, but it's done safely and for the right reasons. We look at your specific lab work and your specific risks. Psychological, we address the brain fog and the rage not as character flaws, but as chemical events. We learn how to protect our peace while our brain is doing its heavy lifting. Lifestyle, we change how we eat, move, and sleep. We stop trying to diet like we are 20 and start eating to support our bones and our muscles. The ghost is busted back in Austin. Sarah Jenkins didn't take the antidepressant. She went home and sat in her driveway for 20 minutes, just breathing. She realized that the doctor hadn't even asked her about her diet. He hadn't asked about her sleep. He hadn't mentioned that her brain fog was a classic sign of dropping estrogen levels. She felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. She started looking up the history of the drugs the doctor had mentioned. She found the name Robert Wilson. She read about the deficiency disease theory, and for the first time in months, she laughed. "I'm not deficient," she whispered to the steering wheel. "I'm just changing." Sarah realized that her doctor wasn't a bad person. He was just a person who had been taught by a system that didn't value her stage of life. If she wanted to feel like herself again, she couldn't wait for a permission slip from a man who thought she was just stressed. She had to become her own expert. The ghost of feminine forever tries to tell us that we are fading out, but the truth is, we are just coming into focus. Robert Wilson died in 1981, but his ideas stayed alive far too long. He wanted women to stay feminine so they wouldn't make the world uncomfortable with their age and their power. He wanted us to be quiet, soft, and compliant. But the second spring is not quiet. It is vibrant. It is strong. It is the time when you stop asking for permission and start taking up space. As we move forward, we are going to leave Robert Wilson in the smoky offices of the 1960s. We are going to look at the brain, not as a failing machine, but as a masterpiece that is getting an upgrade. We are going to look at your hormones, not as an essence you are losing, but as a chemical dance you are learning to lead. You are not a patient waiting for a cure. You are a woman claiming her future. Sarah Jenkins walked into her house that evening and didn't apologize for the cereal bowl on the counter. She didn't hide in the freezer. She sat her family down and told them, "Things are changing in my body, and I'm learning how to handle it. I might be a little different for a while, but I'm going to be better than ever." That was her first step into her second spring, and it's time for yours too. Chapter 2: Why is my brain suddenly unwell? The feeling starts as a tiny flicker of doubt. You are in the middle of a sentence, a thought you have expressed 100 times before, when suddenly the track ends. The train of your thoughts pulls into a station that doesn't exist. You search for a simple word like stapler or calendar, and it is gone. It feels as if a thief has snuck into your mind and rearranged the furniture while you were looking the other way. You smile, you nod, and you hope no one notices the growing hollow space behind your eyes. This isn't just being tired. It is a deep, quiet panic that your very self is beginning to evaporate. The boardroom blank Sarah Jenkins sat at the head of the long mahogany table in her office. The air conditioning was humming, a sound she usually found soothing, but today it felt like a buzzing hornet in her ear. She was 5 minutes into a presentation for the most important client her tech firm had signed all year. Everything was going perfectly. She had the data, she had the slides, and she had the confidence. Then it happened. If we look at the growth projections for, Sarah paused. She looked at the man sitting across from her. He was the CEO of a massive logistics company. She had known him for 4 years. She had been to his house for dinner. She knew his dog's name was Buster, but his name was gone. Not just his name, but the name of his company. The slide behind her was glowing with a chart, but the numbers suddenly looked like ancient runes. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. A hot, prickly sensation climbed up the back of her neck. "Sarah?" her boss prompted, his voice echoing from the far end of the table. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She felt like she was underwater, watching the worried faces of her colleagues through a thick, blurry lens. In her mind, she was screaming at herself to just say anything, but her brain had simply turned off the lights and gone home for the day. She eventually mumbled something about a technical glitch and sat down, her hands shaking under the table. That night, Sarah sat on her porch in the dark. She wasn't thinking about the botched meeting. She was thinking about her grandmother, who had spent the last 5 years of her life in a specialized care home, unable to recognize her own daughter. Sarah was convinced that this was the beginning of the end. At 47 years old, she believed she was watching the first signs of dementia steal her life away. She decided right then that she would have to hide it. She would work twice as hard, sleep half as much, and never let anyone see the broken version of Sarah Jenkins. The doctor who refused to dim the lights in the 1870s, a woman walking through the streets of London, faced a different kind of brain problem. Back then, the medical world was run entirely by men who had a very specific theory about the female mind. They believed that a woman's brain and her reproductive organs were in a constant, violent competition for energy. If a woman studied too much, read too many books, or tried to become a doctor, They claimed her brain would exhaust her body, leading to a shriveled uterus and a life of sickness. Elizabeth Blackwell refused to listen to any of it. Blackwell was the first woman to receive a medical degree in the United States, but her journey was a nightmare of rejection. When she applied to medical schools, 29 different colleges told her no. One professor even suggested she disguise herself as a man to attend classes. Eventually, the students at Geneva Medical College in New York were asked to vote on her admission. Thinking it was a joke, they all voted yes. When she showed up for class, the joke was on them. Blackwell was brilliant, focused, and utterly undeterred by the men who moved their chairs away from her. By the 1870s, she had moved to London and helped found the London School of Medicine for Women. Blackwell's core belief was radical for the time. She believed that knowledge was the only way for a woman to be truly healthy. She fought against the idea that women were fragile or that their brains were somehow weaker than men's. She spent her later years writing about the importance of sanitary education, teaching women exactly how their bodies and nervous systems worked. She argued that the nervous exhaustion many middle-aged women felt wasn't a sign of a failing mind or a punishment for being too smart. Instead, she believed it was a biological process that required understanding, hygiene, and proper care. Blackwell knew that when a woman's body went through a change, it wasn't a breakdown. It was a transition that required a new kind of literacy. She was the first to suggest that we shouldn't just fear the brain fog, we should study it. The brain's secret fuel for over 100 years after Blackwell's death, the medical world still didn't really understand what was happening to women like Sarah. They called it stress, hysteria, or just part of getting older. But recently, scientists have discovered something that would have made Blackwell cheer. Your brain is one of the most expensive organs in your body. Even though it only weighs about 3 pounds, it uses 20% of all the energy you consume. To keep the lights on, your brain needs a constant supply of fuel. For most of your life, estrogen acts like the project manager for that fuel. Estrogen does more than just help you have a baby. It is a master regulator. It travels into your brain and attaches to tiny docking stations called estrogen receptors. Once it docks, it tells your brain to start burning glucose sugar for energy. It keeps your memory sharp, your words flowing, and your internal thermostat stable. During perimenopause, your estrogen levels don't just drop in a straight line. They bounce up and down like a roller coaster. One day you have plenty of fuel, and the next day the tank is empty. Modern brain imaging, led by researchers like Dr. Lisa Mosconi, has shown that during this transition, the brain's energy levels can drop by as much as 30%. This isn't a permanent loss of intelligence. It is a literal power outage. When Sarah stood in that boardroom and couldn't remember her client's name, it wasn't because she was losing it. It was because the part of her brain responsible for word retrieval, the hippocampus, was suddenly starving for fuel. Think of it like this: your brain has been running on a very specific type of gasoline for 30 years. Suddenly, the gas station is closing down. Your brain is broken, but it is being forced to switch its entire engine over to a different kind of power. This remodeling phase is what we experience as brain fog. It is the sound of the engine sputtering as it tries to figure out how to run on a new kind of electricity: the tip of the tongue. You might notice this most often in what scientists call the tip of the tongue phenomenon. You know the word is there. You can feel the shape of it. You might even know what letter it starts with. But you can't pull it across the finish line. This happens because estrogen is vital for the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles executive function. This is your inner CEO. It handles planning your day, switching between tasks, remembering names and dates, controlling your impulses when the fuel supply fluctuates. The CEO goes on an unscheduled coffee break. This is why you might walk into a room and have no idea why you are there, or why you might find your car keys in the refrigerator. In the 1800s, doctors would have told Sarah she was melancholic and needed bed rest. In the 1960s, they might have given her a mother's little helper pill to calm her nerves. But Elizabeth Blackwell would have told her something different. She would have told her that she was experiencing a biological shift that required a new strategy, not a cure for a disease she didn't have. The remodeling project: if you were renovating a house, you would expect some dust. You would expect the power to go out occasionally. You would expect to trip over a few loose floorboards. You wouldn't look at a kitchen with the cabinets ripped out and say, "This house is falling down." You would say, "This house is being updated." The menopausal brain is undergoing a massive renovation. While it feels like you are losing your mind, your brain is actually becoming more efficient in other ways.